So, hi everyone, and welcome to our latest session of the Thought Project. When we started these sessions last year, the goal was to share insights and advice on the challenges that project managers face. And one of the key things that's come up in conversation is around change management. As we all know, not every project or programme has the luxury of a dedicated change manager. So we were keen to explore how project managers can incorporate some of these change management tasks into their projects and ultimately deliver better outcomes and engagement for the business. We have the chat open for you to ask any questions as we go through, and we'll come to them at the end of the session. It's great to open up a discussion. I guarantee whatever challenges you're having, someone else on the session is having the same challenges, so we would love to sort of explore them in more detail. So let's get started. I am delighted to welcome Rob Stone to our session today. Rob is Head of Business Change at Ashurst and has built up their internal capabilities with a team of change managers. Rob's background spans a range of transformation and change roles across a number of law firms, and he definitely understands the challenges of engaging legal stakeholders in the change process. We're also joined today by Jeremy Nicholls, author and director of The Everyday Project Manager. For those of you who don't know Jeremy, he is an experienced project, programme and portfolio manager. His experience spans a number of industries, including multiple law firms. And if that wasn't enough, he also runs a project management training business. Rob, Jeremy, thank you both for joining us today.
My pleasure. Good afternoon.
So we're going to start with a really basic question, Rob, and I think you'd be the best person to address this one. But tell us a little bit about what is change management and what is it not?
I do get asked this a lot by my mother and wife, and they, I'll be honest, still don't really get it. I've used salt and pepper pots before, and that didn't work. You know, trying to like the offside rule. But change management for me is, I think, to be fair, it is. I think for a lot of people, it can be a little bit nebulous. It can be like, what is this stuff? You know, we know we need to build something and do something. What's this sort of change management bit that kind of, you know, we also probably been told we need to do. For me, fundamentally, it's about sort of getting people to want to do new things. I think the key thing there is want to do new things. That's the kind of key bit there. And to do that, I think you've really got to be very clear on the vision of what the change is and what the expectations are around that change. And as a change team, you really got to understand that and work with the people that are defining that to make sure you're absolutely on the same page and obviously kind of deliver the change and meet those expectations. It's also about, I think, engaging people early. That for me, it's probably when I joined Ashurst 3 years ago, and I kind of was pulling together the change framework that we put in place there. I kind of was thinking about the principles of change management, and a lot of law firms, I'm sure we'll probably talk about it at some point, are comparatively immature in terms of probably change management to other industries, you know, but catching up quickly. And the first principle, without a doubt, is engage people early, get people involved in it rather than be seen to be doing something almost like within a business services or behind closed doors and then kind of deliver this thing at the end. You know, it's about engaging people. So that for me is a really important part of it. And I think once you understand the vision and the expectations and you're engaging people, it's knowing when it finishes. You know, it's not a go live. It's when the expectations have been met, or dare I say it, the expectations have been agreed that they're nearly met and it's good enough. But anyway, it's about once the change has happened rather than what's been delivered. So yeah, in a large nutshell, that's change management for me anyway. Yeah.
And something we talked about when we started this conversation about change management, Rob, was around what it's not and how that can be quite confusing to a lot of people. Do you want to just sort of expand on that a little? Well,
I've always kind of put change management working very collaboratively with the business analysis team, and some organisations probably would see that as one. And in actual fact, you know, the business analysis team that we have in our function are great, and a lot of them, at the end of the day, you don't have to be a change manager to do change management. You know, a lot of the stuff it's about getting the activity done, not necessarily who does it. at Ashurst, we're quite fortunate to have a dedicated change team that just is able to focus on some of those activities, and it frees people up to do what they're very good at as well. So it sits very much alongside the business analysis team. But then on the kind of change delivery side, if I can put it like that, there's usually a triangle of change, training, and comms. And so, in answer to your question, what change management is not, it is not training and comms and coming in at the end of a project to do some change management, which is, send out some communications and train people. That is training and that's comms. And it's very important. Change management sits alongside that. As I said, it's about, really getting people prepared for a change and getting them to want to do that change, and, many other things as well. So I think that's a common misconception by a lot of people. It's, training and comms is change management. So for me, it's not that.
And I think as a recruiter, a lot of job descriptions for change managers incorporate all of those things, which is really important. But as you said, it's not the add-on at the end of the project, is it? It's all of the work that goes beforehand.
Well, similar, I don't know many project managers who aren't guilty of having taken that slightly reductive approach to change management. We just need someone to communicate this. It's emails, right? Guilty. It does happen. But it was really interesting when we started to talk about this that I need to start thinking about how much earlier in the process it needs to come.
It's too easy. I've across my team of many different sort of projects that we're doing. There are some that it's a battle. We're being called in late, and they end up doing those things. And as I say to my team and to the people that kind of call them in, I say you're diluting the change management activity. Then, so yeah, you can do it, but are you going to get the adoption? Are people going to be ready and prepared? Are the expectations going to be met? Possibly not.
Rob, is that because? Is that, do you think, because the value of that early engagement isn't felt until the end? Like, it's very difficult to perhaps articulate the value earlier on in a project of having the change manager, doing that change management function, but you really feel it at the end where, everything's flying and bullets are going everywhere.
Yeah, I think just generally for projects, but certainly for change, it's about unearthing rocks and issues, isn't it? It's about dealing with it, whether that's resistance, whether that's actually we've done design and we've headed down a path that actually is not going to add any value, or we know that it's not going to give us the benefit that we want because it can't do something, whatever it might be. It's just kind of trying to unearthing that stuff and getting, the people that ultimately are accountable for the success of this sort of thing, the sponsors, involved to make the right decision. So yeah, I think the earlier, in my experience, the earlier you involve people, and that's where a dedicated change team comes in. It takes a lot of effort to do that and time, particularly if you're building, change champion groups or super user groups, whatever they might be, and actually really working with the sponsors and the stakeholders to get them to understand what their role is. And it's more than just forwarding an email. They're accountable for this stuff. They've got to be making decisions. You've got to present stuff to them, and it takes a lot of time and effort. And sweat and tears probably to do that throughout a project, and that's why I think it's good to have a dedicated team, or as I say, you might have a BA doing some of it, and then they kind of maybe dilutes the business analysis bit or the say training and comms, So yeah.
So the earlier we start, the better, right? For
me, yeah, definitely. And it's at levels, obviously the very beginning is talking to the sponsor, this person that's decided they want this thing to happen, really understanding the vision. And we spend quite a lot of time doing that. And it's just simple. It can be just a one pager, but just really getting them to articulate what's the vision? What's the case for change here? Is it an opportunity? Is it something that's about to fall apart, whatever it might be? And then kind of drilling into that, saying, what are you expecting people to do? What are some of the behaviors that you're expecting to change as a result of this? And then again, you can break that down even more into, okay, so then what are the benefits you're looking for? What do you quantify? What's not quantifiable? And it kind of breaks down. But then even putting that summary on a one page is useful. We've found it very interesting to push people to really articulate it. It makes them think a bit more. Dare I say it, I think sometimes things just kind of happen and I just need to do this because I think I need to do it and just go and do it. And it kind of really pulls in the sponsor and gets them thinking about, actually, I'm going to have to tell people about this. And also for the project team as well, it's really great to have that case for change and the vision in a very simple form, because it keeps people focused on why we're doing this, and actually are we still heading towards that or not. Sometimes you do lose track of it. So simple things like that I found are useful.
And that point about sort of setting it within the vision, and what are the behavioural changes you expect to see? People just aren't used to articulating projects in that way, are they? Typically, I mean, it's a really, that's why you do it a lot of the time. But actually, it's far more common we just articulate in terms of the objectives, what we want to get done, rather than the why of how we're doing this. So it feels like a really powerful tool potentially.
Yeah,
that is underused.
No, I think it is. It's the behaviours bit, because there's a lot that you do with change and training and comms, and if it's a system or a process, then there might be alternative ways, but that's can be quite mechanical, and you can kind of slightly kind of enforce that a little bit more. But where there's a lot of projects are about people wanting to do something different in that behaviour bit, to understand that, because that then helps the sponsor kind of almost, they need to role model that. That's a really good lever in any change, is seeing colleagues or senior people, whoever it might be, just actually talking about it in the way and role modeling and saying, I'm now doing this, whatever it might be. But it's little things like that as well. It just helps us as a change team kind of pull that material together to then get them to do what they need to do to sort of lead on that change.
One of the things we talked about, Robin, I think it's a really important, you touched on it just there. With project delivery, we have a go live date. You can measure the success of whether it's been on time, on budget, on scope, etc. How can you measure what successful change management looks like?
I think having that, really understanding what the vision is and the expectations are, I think is really key. It's something, and again, it's just in my experience, sometimes benefits kind of get lost by the wayside, and I see that, and it's again in my team at Ashurst, I see that as an area where we can be seen to be adding value by looking after the benefits. Now, we don't look after all the benefits. So what we currently do is once you've broken down what the outcomes are and what you're trying to achieve, and you think, well, what are the benefits there? There are typically financial benefits and non-financial benefits. So financial, obviously, system removal or headcount reduction, whatever it might be. There's some pretty unpleasant stuff around there, I guess, but also the non-financial stuff, which is more, about a user experience or a reduction in risk or something like that, or having better data insight, whatever it might be. We generally then kind of start to map that, and that's part of the process as you go through the design and the change impact assessment that the change person would typically do. You then start to add on the columns to the right of the as is, the to be, the change, and who's impacted, and this complexity and the scale and all that sort of stuff. And you start to look at the benefits, so you can then begin to kind of draw out and sort of map those benefits, which then becomes an iterative process. That's another thing to pull in the sponsor, where things change along the delivery life cycle. It's useful to understand what impact that has on an outcome or a benefit or an expectation, and so you're able to talk about that while it happens and then escalate that, and that should be a decision that's made. And so I say from a change team point of view, that's where we can add value. We can be understanding this and getting it to the right people to make a decision to help manage an expectation rather than waiting to the end. How do you know if something's successful? Again, there's different ways. Some theory says it's all about sort of managing a performance dip, so nothing drops off when you go live. It's about understanding what the benefits are and when they're going to be realized. Sometimes it's months after a go live that the benefits are realized, and you need to kind of track from the benefit, what's the adoption like, what's the metric, and again, it gets quite kind of sometimes quite mechanical, but sometimes it is about do people feel better about something, and going out and doing surveys at certain points afterwards, and you can present that in quite a nice, interesting way in a board, and sort of survey questions on a scale of 1 to 10 and present it in like a heat map form, so you can see where people like things and people don't like things, and marry that up with the more kind of data-based kind of reports. So
and with that, Rob, do you use that, so say that heat map example, do you then use that with your team to look at how you would do things differently next time?
I think that helps, in ADCAR, that helps us identify where you might need some reinforcement. Not so much, that the heat map example I just talked about there was if we go out to a team that's just gone through a change, something new they need to do, and we're asking them how they kind of feel about certain parts of it that we can't capture in data or some other way. So it tells us where there might be potential issues. So then that for us helps us then go and think about how we then going to go back in there. Is that a case of, do they not understand it? Do we need the sponsor to go in and kind of enlighten them a little bit more, or whatever it might be? So it's kind of more for the reinforcement type activity than anything else.
Is that potentially where Rob, the change manager, could have a role beyond the life of the project? So as a project manager, I'm used to engaging a change manager for the life of my project, but they can bring a huge amount of benefit to the project by setting things within the wider organizational strategy and that sort of thing, presumably, and taking the outputs and those benefits and seeing if we're moving towards our strategic goals, and helping with that view, presumably.
Yeah, I think there's the trick we find is that we go live with something and then we want to see how successful it is, or we're on track for realizing the benefits and how we might measure that. At some point, there's got to be a cutoff where you say you've met the expectation, it's okay, we realize the benefit, and then is it useful to keep monitoring this just in case it drops off, or just then transition into BAU, right, which is always an interesting time. Otherwise, like project managers and change people be forever just kind of just checking in on stuff that they did years ago. So we've always got to kind of transition over to BAU. But we kind of, that link to the kind of strategy bit is what we spent quite a lot of time the last year and a half looking at, getting right up front, making sure. So we've been doing a lot of work on a governance model that, and Ashurst, like perhaps many law firms and many organizations, was again, probably just catching up on the maturity in terms of how they manage projects. There's a case of stuff just seemed to happen. Partner might see something quite cool and, walk up to someone and say, can you do this sort of thing? And all of a sudden a project starts, it's a little bit like the Wild West. So we spent an awful lot of time. Yeah, trying to be polite there, but putting in this governance where we now have cross-functional governance committee, but the key thing that we've done is people now come in through the front door rather than in through the back door, the windows, wherever it might be, and they know this is how you get something done, because all roads will eventually lead to. I work obviously in a transformation function as an IT function, usually in one of those two kind of functions where the resources are needed to do a project, and so if we all link arms and be strong and say, well, we're going to just, this is how you engage with us, in a nice way, and we'll resource and plan, and also then it escalates up to the kind of financial decisions should they need any as well. But part of the criteria of getting projects in is absolutely how does this link to our strategy? Does it overlap with anything we're doing? And we've matured a lot in the last year and a half with that in place. And it also has helped us to start to cut out the noise. It's often the noise. We're all doing projects and other stuff comes on the side, and just cutting away that noise and being able to give, all the delivery teams a clarity on what projects we're doing, why they're important, which is really important for motivation in a project as well. Like, you can absolutely see, this isn't just something that we're just being told to do. I can see how this makes a difference on the front line, whether it's, we look at all sorts of things from, is this helping to, attract talent, retain talent, grow the business, whatever it might be, then how does that link to the strategy? We've got all that mapping. So we try and do as much of that up front, basically.
So as a change management team, you've got some really great processes and governance in place. If we were talking to project managers, we've got lots of project managers on the session today. We'd be keen to share some key things that they can take away and implement on their projects to try and engage that end user adoption more. Rob, you, Jeremy and I and yourself put together sort of five things that people can take away. So it'd be great to talk through that sort of framework with you and the first thing we looked at was really outlining the benefits, and we've touched on it already, but that case for change piece, tell us how project managers can embrace that a little bit more.
Yeah, like I said, if not every project is fortunate enough to have the split of resources, and I say it doesn't have to be a change manager doing it, but we've certainly found that just even taking half an hour out to just a simple one pager to really drill into what the vision and expectations are and the outcomes, and that then helps with the kind of benefits bit is just quite a useful exercise. We're starting to push it a bit more than that, where we're at the beginning of a project, we're asking the sponsor to essentially write the newsflash comms articles. We're saying, just imagine we've gone live. How would you write this? What would you want to be saying? And that just helps them kind of do that. So I think it's always worth sitting down, and even if the project's already started, and sometimes we don't always come in at the beginning at all, but if it's not there, then we go for that exercise just briefly, just to make sure actually we're still heading on the right track. So I would do that. I think then coming into the benefits is important, because that's how it's another way of really pulling in the sponsors. I think that's ultimately the sponsors are accountable for the change. We facilitate it. The project as a team delivers something that is then used to probably enact the change, but ultimately the sponsors are accountable for it. So if we can make sure that we're really clear on the benefits and how those are impacted as you go through the life cycle, spending time doing that, I think is key as well.
And Jeremy, sorry, Rob.
No, go on.
I just said, Jeremy, that's quite a shift from a project management mindset of objectives, isn't it?
Well, I think I think having an understanding of the benefits is absolutely that vision benefits piece is what sets up a project for success without a shadow of a doubt. But then you move into delivery mode. So how do we then get those things? And that's what the objectives are about. And that's what for the vast majority of the project life cycle, the project manager is going to be focused on is how do we deliver the objectives. But if you haven't done that work up front to tie the objectives to the benefits, to tie it back to something you are trying to achieve, then you're just doing something without a purpose. So, and like I say, the doing stuff, the delivery ought to be the project manager's main focus. But it's not a great project manager who hasn't taken the time to understand the context within which these objectives sit, and actually sat down with the sponsor and just both of you get yourselves satisfied that if I go and deliver these objectives, are we really happy that you're going to get these benefits? So having that thought and that upfront piece on the benefits is of phenomenal value. Because, as I say, otherwise, as a PM, you're just delivering into the void. You're just doing a bunch of stuff with no strategic purpose, and you can sit there and call the project successful. We cut the ribbon. We did what the objective said we were supposed to do. On paper, the project's successful because it's delivered. But in reality, you've not changed the business if it's not tied to some really clear objectives, some really clear benefits. Sorry.
For me, to get slightly more detailed on that, usually, as I say, this the business analyst and the change manager would work quite collaboratively through design, understanding what the as is and the to be is. It really then the change manager starts to produce a change impact assessment where they're kind of writing what that change is. What does that gap actually in kind of non-project speak? What actually we're asking? We're actually removing something, or you're asking you to do something in addition to whatever you already do, whatever it might be. Then, as I kind of mentioned earlier, kind of build on that, and from there you say, well, okay, is there a benefit there? And it's a positive or a negative as well. What's the kind of benefit there? And then how can we start to measure that? Because in terms of the metrics and what have you, but because then as part of that engagement with the end users and the groups, maybe with a champion group initially, or depending on the scale of it, what we sometimes do is a change readiness session with end user groups before training. So that's the first time you might start to really engage everyone, beyond the champion group and the sponsors. You start to engage a broader community prior to training, because there could be some stuff in there that they just need to get their heads around. It could be some really negative stuff in there or some positive stuff in there, and also talk to them about the reasons why this is happening, get opportunity to talk about it, and get all of that out before you do training. And the benefits is, as long as the change impacts and the benefits is kind of key content for running those sessions, just to give people the chance, and that's that early engagement. Don't just, sometimes if training is the first exposure to something for people, they might not be that receptive to it. They haven't had a chance to understand it and talk about it and, deal with it, I guess.
I think that's something you said, Rob, in our conversation, that no one should be going to a training session without knowing why they're there or what's happening. And those change readiness sessions, I think, could have huge impact.
Yeah, we find them useful. And again, depending on the scale of it, you can be, doing quick kind of check-ins and surveys of people at that point to help identify, okay, is there a lot of resistance? There's still some resistance. Where's that coming from? And, kind of dealing with it again before go live.
And that leads me into another one of the points that we were talking about in terms of this sort of framework, but identifying that resistance, not ignoring it, and actually really making it clear where those problems might lie. That's quite an important part of this process.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. I say it's all about smoothing out, identifying rocks and smoothing it out and getting people ready so they can understand they're feeling positive about something, they understand and they want to do it. It doesn't always happen, let's be honest. Of course, there's always, particularly law firms, there's some right characters around, aren't there? But, but that resistance is...
So I was going to say, does it all come down to adoption of the change and the volume of adoption? So again, back to that point of a project manager delivering the objectives, and we go, there we go, we've delivered it, the new IT system or the change in the way of working or whatever it might be. It's like, great, no one's using it. The project or the initiative fails. The project might have succeeded in delivering the objectives, but the overall initiative fails without that adoption.
Yeah. And it's even more challenging if there is an alternative. If you're creating a new channel on something, but you're not closing out the old channel or whatever it is, then, how do you entice people over, or if it's the old way isn't happening anymore, then it's a little bit easier. But the resistance, absolutely. I think it's really important. This again is where I think managing it, setting up the kind of sponsor and stakeholders at the beginning and coaching them a little bit to say, this is what we need from you. We will need you to probably go and speak to some people as we engage more people where they might not quite be on board, and it's clearly going to have more of an impact coming from you rather than a project team. That's what their role is, sort of to help us deal with this resistance and explain what's going on. Often a lot of resistance is people aren't aware of something. They're not actually really against something. They're just kind of a bit like, I don't know about it. So
is it sort of fear of the new? Is that a big thing to overcome?
Yeah, I think people make assumptions because if you don't engage and tell people what's going on and why we're doing it, then I think they kind of assume some other reasons, and that makes people tense up a little bit. So, there will be people that are genuinely resistant to something, and I think that's exactly where the sponsors can help to unlock that a little bit. But I think that's why when you engage with the champion groups or anyone at all, really, even with the sponsors or wherever, in any form of engagement, sort of detecting a bit of resistance is really important and thinking about, how to resolve it.
And something that we've touched on quite a lot, and actually we had a session last year on project sponsors, is making them accountable. And it'd be really great to just sort of clarify that a bit around, helping sponsors see what their responsibility is and what they're accountable for.
Yeah, it's just sometimes not easy. Going a little bit off piste on this, but you've kind of got to I think to manage sponsors and stakeholders well. As a project team, as a project manager, change manager, anyone that's engaging with them, they have to kind of build that trust, don't you? So, and that sometimes takes a little bit of time. And one of the things we're kind of looking at in my change team is how we can kind of prepare ourselves for managing sponsors a bit better, almost a little bit of internal development on it, and kind of looking at There's lots of books on this. One I read recently called Trusted Advisor, which is quite an old book, but it's quite a good one. It's got lots of kind of bullet lists and things to think about when you're engaging people, and you need to build trust with people. And there's a really good bit in there, and it's for a sponsor to trust you. And only when they trust you will they probably listen to what you're saying and then want to do this stuff because they believe in it. You've got to be credible, so you've got to know what you're talking about. So hopefully you can prove that. Reliable. You've kind of got to get on with them as well. You can't be an idiot, I guess. Basically, what that means is you've got to be able to sort of relate to them, and also prove that you're doing it for them and not yourself. So they call it self-orientation. So, if any one of those 4 things are not there, the sponsor won't have that trust in you, or it will take longer to kind of get there, because you could be the industry expert on something and you could be very reliable, and you could be a really nice person. But if it looks like you're doing something for your own gain rather than them, why would they trust you on it? So, it goes for any of those 4 things. So that's important, I think, to think about that. Again, not just as a change manager, but as a PM and anyone else, think about how you build that trust and what the things you've got to demonstrate are to be trustful. And then once I think you've got that and you're building that up, I think they'll listen more. And then, they do need to become, absolutely, they should be seen as they need to understand they're accountable for this. It's them that are going to help with, it's ultimately them that's going to be probably, what's the word I'm looking for? It's them that has to be responsible for kind of delivering the benefits, and it's how they're going to be judged. So they need to understand that. They need to kind of get involved in being confident that this thing will happen and that they're going to get the benefits, and they need to make the decisions on any kind of benefits review. They're going to have to be dealing with the resistance as well, as I sort of said, and they're the people that need to drive and lead the change. It's not, I think probably all do it. It's pointless a project team sending out a communication to a massive audience, because particularly in law firms, and they're all kind of very time poor, probably in most sectors anyway, they'll read the stuff that comes from the people that matter to them. So getting them in the right frame and getting them to do the right thing is a huge lever that you have to work.
It's interesting as well, what an exciting role that is potentially. You get to lead this change. You get to transform this business. How much resistance there is to sponsorship in general. Like I've worked with a number of sponsors who are just like, yeah, just give me the update. Tell me what you need from me. And that's the sort of level of interest you get. In fact, if you get that level of interest, sometimes that's a win. But, but that ought to be really exciting. I'm leading this change. I'm going to be the person who's taking our company in a new direction, or even just this department, or just doing this thing that's going to make how we all work a little bit more exciting. I find that really an interesting part of that role, and I find it surprising that there's quite a lot of resistance to sort of stepping into that element of the sponsorship role. Plenty of people are sort of seem to be happy enough to put their hand up and go, yeah, I'll run that. I'll sponsor that. Fine, it's in my area. Without taking the sort of real, wow, this could be something really cool that we can do, and this is really exciting, which is where the interest for the role for me would be. In that ability to really drive change and have ownership of it. People talk about wanting to be leaders in their organization and wanting to lead change, and here's a role that's created just for that, and people don't seem to embrace that as much as one might expect.
And we're here to support you in that. We're here to make you look good. We're here to tell you when things aren't going to go to plan, so you can deal with it, or we're here to support you to be seen to be leading it. It's
and you get to make some quite exciting decisions sometimes. I find that really interesting. And as you say, the project team and the change management and that whole organisation is you could view it that ultimately we're all there to make the sponsor look good. We all look good if they do, but ultimately that's what we're here to do, is deliver on their vision and get the benefits.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. And Jeremy, you pointed out as well that project managers, they tick the box and you cut the ribbon and that's their job done. And it's been a really interesting conversation around the change management piece and how much longer that goes on and what else there is to do. But coming back to that sponsor, and it's them that's driving the behaviours, isn't it, within that project, and they're leading by example and having an opportunity to as you said, make themselves look good. It's a really, really interesting way of looking at it. We've covered off quite a few of the bits in the framework, and just to sort of summarise for because we've sort of gone around a little bit, and I will follow up with an email for everyone with the points on there. But the things we've talked about are really outlining the benefits clearly and taking the time to do that. Looking at high-level impact, change impact assessments, making those sponsors really accountable. And I think actually all of this comes back to that point. Identifying the resistance, and then looking at that change readiness session pre-training to make sure everyone understands what they need to do and how it's going to impact them. All of those things are things that if there is no change manager on a project or program, a project manager can pick up those tasks, can't they? Rob, something you've always said is you don't need to be a change manager to do change management.
No, I don't think you do. I think it's just being aware of there's some things that should happen. If someone else has got the ability to take it on, then go for it. Not always. We don't always have the luxury of a full sort of project team with all the sort of nice roles, do we? We kind of it's just. Is there
a role that you mentioned the business analyst earlier? Is there a role if you don't have the luxury of a change manager? I've worked with some really good ones, and I know they can make or break a project. Yeah. But if you don't have the luxury of a dedicated change manager, is there a sensible place for that to sit? I've seen PMs try and pick up elements of it. I've seen business analysts, as you say, there's a little bit of a kinship between those roles. Mm-hmm. Is there a place where it sort of more naturally sits if you, like I say, if you don't have an organisation that has dedicated change management?
I think the PM naturally picks up the kind of stakeholder engagement, mapping the stakeholders, engaging, doing all that bit about the vision, that kind of probably naturally sit there. I think the change impact assessment and benefits bit will probably naturally sit with the BA. Most, and a BA will also sometimes, really depending on it, will probably sometimes pick up training as well, testing, they kind of really get involved in a lot of stuff, don't they?
I suppose here again,
comms as well, it just depends, but it's the things like it's just getting the kind of change champion group, or that kind of identifying people and managing that group. That can be quite time consuming. That's the bit that often that'll get dropped. And let's say if you don't have a change manager, then there's plenty of things that a BA needs to do and a PM needs to do and everyone else needs to do. It just always gets on the side.
So there's the benefit. You can sort of split out between a number of roles, or you could decide that you want to give those things some focus. And why on earth wouldn't you want to give those things your focus? Are we going to achieve the benefits? Are we talking to the people affected by this change? That feels like, a hugely sensible thing to be doing.
When you start to build a kind of change, people call all sorts of things like change management office or transformation office or whatever it might be. I think when you start to get a change manager in or two change managers in, they will generally sit across projects. So what we've seen is as the team has grown, a project manager and a BA gets very involved in what they're doing, quite rightly. They've got a whole focus is on that. And the change manager layer will start to look at everything from an end user group perspective, whether it's lawyers or secretaries or finance, whoever it might be, or even geographies as well, and then start to join the dots. And we spend a lot of time talking about how we engage with those functions and teams, because actually there are 7 projects that are going to be impacting them in the next quarter, not just, and an individual project manager might or might not recognize that. So with that's when that effort to engage people and understand everything else that's going in there is dealt with within the change team, for me anyway. That's a logical place for it to kind of sit. And then you start to get into understanding even the sequencing of what's going live when, start to deal with the kind of whole, fatigue bit as well. And again, people, a lot of that is genuinely down to an awful lot going on, but can also be down to awareness. So, we start to pull together, whether it's a newsletter or presentations, we go into operations groups or secretarial groups, or even into the kind of office managing partners to sort of say, actually, this is what's happening over the course of the next 12 months or 6 months. You can see what's going on across all the projects and kind of explained in a way that makes sense to them, not from a project terminology point of view, but from a, this is the change for you. So that kind of helps, I think, a little bit with fatigue. There's we're all living it, aren't we? I mean, there's an awful lot going on everywhere at the moment. So I think just having that longer vision and also being a group where people feel like they can come and ask questions. We have a portal which we have everything on there which we're looking to develop, so people can actually see what's going on and proactively are quite interested in getting involved in that. So always how we want to build the kind of almost like change communities out there that can help with things.
That's quite nice when people become self-selecting as well.
Yeah, be nice to get that's the idea. Yeah. And we're doing, I think, with some of the senior people as well, sort of proactively getting out there and engaging with them so they can see everything that's going on. So if they want to know more about something or whatever it might be, we're kind of building that kind of senior network. So again, they can come to us if they want to know more, and eventually want to get to a point where they come to us because there's something else going on and we can help them with advising on some change. So you got that kind of within the program sponsor coaching and support, but then also kind of just broadly from a firm organization point of view, getting in there as well. And then really once that kind of happens, then you generally start shifting the dial on change maturity and having organizations probably better at receiving stuff. But that doesn't happen quickly, but it will happen eventually.
Yeah, you're getting into sort of organizational cultural change at that point almost, aren't you?
Exactly. Yeah.
In terms of change fatigue, you just touched on it there in terms of, making people aware of all the change across the business. One of the challenges I think some firms have is that there's multiple PMOs across the firm. What steps can you take to try and avoid that change fatigue?
Do you say multiple PMOs across the firm?
There's not one company-wide PMO collating everything. So there's lots of things happening all over the place.
Yeah.
Is it just a case of making people aware of what's happening?
Yeah, I think unless you're fortunate, and that's again something that we're just putting in. That's what we've been doing recently. We're looking at ePMO, enterprise PMO, looking at that. So reducing the number of PMOs, so we've got a genuinely kind of global 360 view, and it all comes in, and the governance is there, which will be amazing. We're halfway there, but we're looking to sort of develop that even more. But that is, that's pretty good, I think. But yeah, a lot of places probably won't be quite there yet. And so again, by my experience, it's the change team that generally is the glue between them and sort of joins all the dots. And then we kind of think, okay, well, there's a lot going on for that group in that time. We should go and talk to them. And it's always difficult aligning a change team because you have that kind of, well, do we kind of, particularly if you're growing into a kind of a big global organization, are we kind of geographically aligned? Do you have to look after everything in the geography, or do you go by speciality? And there isn't. I've done it so many different ways. It's always a hybrid. It's always right. We just need to be close, very close as a team, and talk a lot and adapt to kind of what's going on. But it's just having that group of people that is connected to everything and then can kind of talk about it. We have how we kind of manage it before, and this will get better with the whole PMO stuff that we're doing as well. But what we did in the change team was a project heat map. So I just had a massive Excel spreadsheet, every single project, every single end user group, from partners, associates, trainees, secretaries, finance, ops, whoever it might, right the way across. And I just had a high, medium, low. I said, right, here are all the projects, right, who's impacted, high, medium or low? And you can just start to see actually there's an awful lot going on for finance, or there's, whatever it might be. And I just would bring that around and talk to a lot of people, and they go, oh, wow, actually, yeah, I can see there's a lot going on. And actually that group is being absolutely hammered. You can then introduce a timeline on top of that to say, well, when is all that happening? But just even something as simple as that is really useful for talking to senior people to say, this is why you're getting, or you're going to get some change fatigue, or you've got to watch this, or we've got to make sure we communicate quite a lot with this group to tell them what's going on, because there's an awful lot happening in that group. that's quite a simple way of doing it. But you've got to have the people to pull that together, which is usually a change team for me anyway. Yeah.
Okay. We've covered a lot today. Thank you so much, Rob. We've got a question that's come through from someone who is not one of those people that's not a change manager but has sort of assumed that role. Is there any courses or reading material that you would recommend for change managers, Rob?
I think it happens all the time, isn't it? As I say, everyone puts a change hat on at some point. Our framework is kind of based off ADCAR, so ProSci ADCAR is a pretty popular one. If you are getting into change, then that's often something that people will look for on a CV as well, getting ProSci certified ADCAR. Yeah. So that's a pretty useful one. There's loads of free stuff out there. Go onto the ProSci website and you can just Googling ADCAR, which is kind of their framework. It's like the kind of building blocks of the activities that you do for kind of change, like awareness and desire and things like that. APMG is another one. But there are so many. You go and Google change management methodologies and you're going to get a lot coming back. Again, you can, even some of the places like McKinsey are quite good. They have quite a good framework for managing change, and there's lots of sort of content on there. For some of the sort of cultural stuff they do as well is good. But yeah, I'd say the sort of big ones are usually sort of ProSci or APMG, and there's a lot of free stuff out there. Yeah, as I say, there are so many. Yeah. Perfect.
So basically, we've come to the conclusion that everyone should have a change team, and they do wonderful stuff, and Absolutely. That's brilliant. You've given us some great tips, Rob, on things, some really simple things that can be done to think differently around project delivery and around that end user adoption. Jeremy, is there anything you had to ask Rob before we finish up today?
Well, like I say, you covered a huge amount of ground, and it certainly made me think again about how well or otherwise I utilise change management on my project. No, I think that's fascinating. I do think one of the interesting points there is around that early engagement. I can't tell you the number of lessons learned sessions I've done where almost anyone on the project team has gone, I wish you'd engaged me earlier. Of course, we'd all like to be engaged early, but I think this is one of those areas where actually early engagement and shaping up front can actually really influence how the project delivers. And it's ironic that it is one of those roles which is so often left till the very last minute. Oh, sugar, we got to talk to a bunch of people now. Mm-hmm. And actually that only utilizes one strand of the whole piece, and you miss out on all that benefit. So yeah, that whole piece about early engagement, I think is something I should take away.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Robert, thank you so much for your time. Jeremy, thanks for joining us today. If anyone has any questions or follow-ups, please do reach out to me, and we will be able to follow up with Rob for you and get in touch with him. Jeremy, if anyone has any questions for you, how can they reach you?
If you're interested in project management training or any of the certainly the vision, benefits, objectives, some of the stuff we talked about today, I'm at everydaypm.co.uk. Do feel free to reach out to us via the website, everydaypm.co.uk.
And for everyone online, we'll make sure you get a recording of today's session, and hopefully we can see you soon. Rob, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nicola. Thanks, everyone. Bye.